Good morning again. It is Tuesday. Today, again, we are moving on with our discussion of analyzing poetry. And today we're going to be talking specifically about imagery. Now, as you can imagine, if we were all in class together, we would be talking about these images, and it would be a little bit more interesting and interactive and fun to do this activity, but we're going to do it anyhow because it is interesting, and I do need you to think about these things and see how all of this ties into images created within poetry. Okay, so I'm going to bring up a picture and I'm going to show it for about 5 seconds. And I just want you to either think about, write down, whatever you want to do. But I want you to look at the picture and I want you to note some things that you're seeing. Okay, so 5 seconds. What do you see? Here we go. Okay, so what are some things that you saw, right? Maybe you saw bodega, the word bodega. Maybe you saw a dentist office upstairs. Maybe you saw a Dalmatian, a little girl in a yellow dress leading that Dalmatian, right? So there could be all kinds of things that you potentially saw in that image. Now I'm going to show you that same image for about another 7 seconds. And I want you to think about why the artist created this picture. So I want you to think about what meaning might be behind the images that are um, within this larger image. So why would the artist choose the image that he or she did, and what might be the meaning behind that? Because that's essentially what happens in poetry. We have to think about the images created and how they affect the emotion and the overall meaning of that poem. Okay. So at this point, you might have caught on to me, especially because you're able to look closely at this image since it's right in front of your face. And you may be seeing that things here aren't necessarily what they seem. So perhaps the writer is making, or I'm sorry, the artist here is making that comment that we have to look closely in order to see what is really happening here. Because what we thought was a yellow dress is actually a nacho chip or a tortilla chip. And what we thought were bricks of a building are actually dog biscuits. And what we thought was a light post is actually a screwdriver, and the light is a pacifier. And the trees, well, those aren't trees, that's broccoli and kale. So there could be many comments being made here, little things making up the bigger picture of life. There could be a lot of deeper meanings here. But essentially, when we talk about poetry, we want to make sure that we are familiar with the idea that poets and writers in general are using words to create these images, and these images create that meaning for us. So we have to look closely, we have to read carefully, because just like we saw in this picture, things aren't always what they seem. Now, just for fun, this is actually a puzzle. I'm sure it's a lot of different things, but the image is used for one of those 5,000 piece puzzles or whatever. And you can see, so there's a lot more to this image. And if you look closely, and I hope you will go back and look at this because it is a lot of fun to see what everything is and to see that the feathers of the swan or whatever that is there on the building is actually a glove, and to see that the sidewalk is made of like some kind of Triscuits or wheat bread or something. There's rulers and there's corn holders and all kinds of stuff. So if you look closely at this image, you'll see again that things are not what they seem. And again, we have to think about what meaning is being created because of these images. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at two poems that really create some interesting images with the words that they choose. And because of those images and because of those words, there is a specific tone that is created that creates that mood for us. And then at the end of this, I do have a bit of a challenge of you to try to write some poetry on your own. This is not something you have to turn in. You will be on your honor, but it's a fun assignment, and I'm hoping that you will do it and perhaps share it with some of your friends. So, the first poem is entitled Embrace by Billy Collins. So I'm going to let you read this on your own first, as we discussed before. Well, we are going to read this more than once. It's important for you to read it on your own so that my reading does not make a biased tone for you. So go ahead and read that. Okay, so right off the bat, you can see the image that's being created here. Some of you have probably done this when you hug yourself. So you know the parlor trick. Wrap your arms around your own body, and from the back, it looks like someone is embracing you. Her hands grasping your shirt, her fingernails teasing your neck. From the front, it's another story. You never looked so alone. Your crossed elbows and screwy grin. You could be waiting for a tailor to fit you with a straitjacket, one that would hold you really tight, right? So the images created here and the meaning behind this poem, Embrace, is again that idea of things aren't always what they seem. So the person who is involved in this self embrace, although it might be good practice to, give yourself a bit of a hug. Um, if you are trying to fool others into thinking that you are in some sort of loving, caring, deep relationship, but from the front we realize that that is not, in fact, the case. It might look something like this. Oh, that's an intense face there. But anyhow, yeah, so from the back, it looks like someone is hugging you. From the front, yes, it looks like you could be ready, or this person could be ready for a straitjacket. I have a feeling this is a famous person. Of course, I just Googled like hugging yourself, embracing, etc. But I don't know who he is. Maybe you do. You can enlighten me if this is a famous person. I'm out of the loop. All right, our second poem is a fun poem, and it's entitled Fork by a man named Charles Simic. And what it does is it takes the ordinary object that is a fork that we use daily, and it looks at it in a different way, and it creates a very interesting and unique perspective of this everyday object by the words, by the tone, by the images created. So go ahead and read through that. And there we have it, Fork by Charles Simic. This strange thing must have crept right out of hell. It resembles a bird's foot worn around the cannibal's neck. As you hold it in your hand, as you stab with it into a piece of meat, it is possible to imagine the rest of the bird, its head, which, like your fist, is large, bald, beakless, and blind. Okay, so there's a lot of ominous terms used here to create this strange image of a fork. Um, Saying that it crept right out of hell, the insinuation of a cannibal, stabbing into a piece of meat. So, as you can see, the words, like we discussed yesterday, choosing words like stab instead of poke, things like that, creeping out of hell instead of coming or walking out of hell. So, these word choices are quite important and done quite deliberately to create that image, to create that meaning, to create that tone. And essentially, I had a lot of fun looking up creepy forks. So if you're bored today, just go ahead and Google scary fork. It's interesting, but here are some that I found. So here are some of our demented forks, as Charles Simic writes about in this poem. So, my challenge to you, just like fork, I'd like you to look around you and I'd like you to think of an everyday object. And I want you to write about it in a way that makes it seem creepy, scary, not the everyday object that we know of. So think about a pen. Think about what it does to a paper and how it works. or earrings that are like shoved through the flesh of your earlobe, things like that. And it's just fun to think about things in that way and to try to create those unique images based on the way that you decide to provide details about that object. So, like I said, you are on your honor with this activity. It's just something I want you to try, not something that we need to grade necessarily. So, you are on your honor that you are watching this video and completing this activity to receive those activity points for today. As I mentioned previously, at the end of this week, Thursday, Friday, you will be working on an in-depth poetry analysis, and all of these things are going to be involved in that analysis. So you'll be looking at tone, you'll be looking at words, you'll be looking at images, and how all of these things come together to create the meaning and emotion associated with the poem that you choose to work with. So more information on that coming, but it is worth 100 points, major points, and so that's why I'm making such a big deal about it. So all of these little activities that we're doing will help you in the end create that analysis that will be discussed on Thursday and due on Friday. All right. So if you have any questions, have fun with the writing of your poem or the description of your object as weird and creepy. And we'll talk again tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about the personal connection with poetry that we can all make, and the fact that, as mentioned before, it's impossible for a writer to completely remove themselves from their written work, or any artist for that matter, to remove themselves, their mark, their kind of um, the way that they go about things from the work that and art that they create. And we're also going to look a little bit about how poems can be useful in everyday life. There'll be a little activity, and then Thursday, Friday, we'll get to that activity. Okay, guys and gals, have a wonderful day, and email me with any questions, and we'll talk to you again soon.